Across the spiral arm, a quiet trade league of many species kept to careful routes and old treaties, while beyond them a fierce coalition of raiders gathered and argued about conquest and honor, and when a distant outpost of the League fell to those raiders, a message of fear went out, calling for reinforcements and rescue and strength. The raiders had expected a response from nearby allies and maybe a handful of old cruisers and a cloud of drones, but the signal passed through hidden relays and ancient beacons until it reached a blue world that few in the wider galaxy truly understood, and on that world, leaders listened and did not hesitate. Humans had a long memory for distant cries, and when a plea for help arrived, they read the data and saw children and farmers and quiet scholars under threat, and the decision was swift and shared across continents as fleets that had been in training and patrol were given new orders. The Raider Coalition believed itself supreme, with proud warriors and heavy ships and a creed that said fear was weakness and mercy was folly. So they set up a blockade around the captured outpost and prepared for the expected counterattack from the League, and they laughed at the thought of a timid response far beyond the reach of their scanners. Human shipyards woke with activity, and ship after ship slid into space with crews eager and calm and loaded with supplies for allies and with armaments tuned for swift and decisive action. And the Armada grew until it was the largest movement of human power since their last great war. Admirals and tacticians spoke with quiet voices across the network, sharing maps and projections, and while the raiders drank and boasted, the humans prepared with discipline and a sense of purpose that came from a long tradition of defending those who could not defend themselves. The Armada was ready. It moved as one wave through folded space and emerged near the outpost in a silent storm of metal and light that dwarfed anything the raiders had imagined, and sensors across the Coalition fleet screamed warnings as thousands of human vessels formed lines and arcs in perfect order. Raiders were stunned, and for a moment their pride faltered. Yet their leaders shouted commands and brought weapons online, hoping to scare this unknown force away. But humans did not come to posture. They came to end the threat from the flagship of the human fleet. A calm voice broadcast a message to all channels, stating that the outpost would be freed and that the raiders were ordered to withdraw and leave behind all prisoners and weapons, and the tone was firm with outrage. Some raider captains hesitated, but others fired first, sending volleys of plasma and kinetic rounds toward the nearest human cruisers, and in response, the Armada unleashed a coordinated defense that absorbed the attack and returned fire with precision. Human beams sliced through raider shields and holes with controlled bursts that disabled rather than destroyed whenever possible, because the goal was not slaughter but to stop the invasion, and the raider formation began to break under the relentless efficiency. Fighters swarmed like schools of fish, darting between larger ships, targeting engines and weapon arrays, while rescue shuttles moved toward the outpost ready to evacuate civilians, and the contrast between human order and raider chaos became clear to all watching. On the surface of the outpost, trapped families saw the sky fill with streaks of light, and for the first time since the invasion, they felt hope as human dropships landed and soldiers moved through the streets, securing areas and guiding people to safety with steady voices. The raiders fought fiercely, but they were not prepared for an enemy that combined compassion with overwhelming strength, and soon their leaders realized that their call for reinforcements had instead summoned a force that would end their campaign. One by one, raider vessels surrendered or were disabled and boarded by human marines, who treated captured crews with strict but fair conduct, and this further shook the raiders, who had expected cruelty but found discipline instead. Coalition flagship attempted a desperate escape, but was intercepted by a trio of human battleships that formed a net of energy fields and forced it to halt. And when its commander was brought before the human admiral, he expected execution but was instead offered a chance to order a full retreat and save what remained of his people. Faced with the reality of defeat, the commander agreed and broadcast the order, and across the battlefield raider ships powered down and began to withdraw, leaving behind the outpost and the prisoners they had taken. As the last raider vessel fled into the void, the human fleet remained to ensure the safety of the region, and to assist the League in rebuilding, and doctors and engineers and diplomats poured into the outpost, bringing aid and support. The League leaders who had feared the worst now saw their world saved, and they looked upon humanity with a mix of awe and gratitude, realizing that these beings from a blue world were not just warriors, but guardian. Stories spread quickly across the galaxy about how the Raiders had called for reinforcements, and how humans had arrived with a war fleet that ended the threat in a single, decisive campaign. And these tales were told in markets and academies, and even in the halls of former Raider clans on Earth. The people watched the reports with quiet pride, not in conquest, but in having stood up for others, and children learned that strength was meant to protect, and that even across the stars kindness could travel with courage. The outpost was rebuilt stronger than before with new defenses and shared technology, and it became a symbol of cooperation between species and of the day when humanity proved that it would not stand by while injustice ruled. Years later, travelers passing through the region would see monuments not to destruction, but to unity, and they would hear elders recount how a desperate call had brought not just ships and soldiers, but a new era of trust. The Raider coalition faded into history, its members choosing trade and diplomacy over endless war, having learned that there were forces in the galaxy that would answer cruelty with resolve and mercy with fairness. Human fleets continued to explore and to watch over the lanes of space, ready to respond whenever a cry for help was heard. And though they were capable of immense power, they carried with them a guiding belief that every life had value. And so the tale of that great arrival lived on, reminding all who heard it that even in a vast and often harsh universe, there were those who would cross any distance to defend the innocent, and to bring light where darkness threatened to grow.